A secret in the depths of the ocean, a web of corruption on land. A woman found herself caught in the midst of this intertwined destiny. Under the shimmering waters of the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of California, as the sun began to set, a small, unassuming sailboat, the Sea Ghost, gently glided towards the harbor. At its helm was a young woman who looked like an ordinary vacationer. With her comfortable clothes, light brown hair waving in the wind, and a face subtly tanned by the sun, she projected the image of a casual sea enthusiast. But she was far from ordinary. This woman was the highest-ranking systems officer in the United States Navy, Admiral Evelyn Eve Hayes. Evelyn was at the forefront of a classified, multi-year project, an autonomous navigation system named Pathfinder. This system was designed to enable vessels to navigate seamlessly without human intervention, even in the most challenging conditions. Admiral Hayes was personally conducting the final tests of the system, far from prying eyes, aboard her unassuming sailboat, the Sea Ghost. These tests were critically important for the future of the Navy. Even the slightest malfunction could jeopardize billions of dollars in investment and the lives of thousands of service members. Thus, the secrecy of Evelyn's identity and her mission was vital. However, not everything went according to plan. As twilight descended, a distinct Coast Guard patrol boat appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching the Sea Ghost. What should have been a routine inspection quickly spiraled into a nightmare. The Coast Guard officers stopped the sailboat and began their interrogation. Their faces bore a familiar arrogance and greed. "Ma'am, we suspect you have illegal equipment on board your vessel. Smuggling activities have increased in the area. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to impound your boat and all your equipment." Admiral Evelyn Hayes. For years, she had been secretly testing Pathfinder, an autonomous navigation system that was part of a highly classified project aboard her old sailboat, the Sea Ghost, until corrupt Coast Guard officers stopped her, suspecting her of smuggling. The Admiral, concealing her true identity, allowed her boat to be destroyed and herself to be detained. What happened when her civilian ID was entered into the police station's computer? And how did this incident expose one of the Navy's biggest corruption scandals? Despite the storm raging within her, Evelyn maintained her composure. She did not reveal her true identity. Exposing that a Navy admiral in civilian disguise was being threatened by a corrupt ring would not only jeopardize her mission, but also tarnish the Navy's reputation. "I have no illegal activities, and I will not bribe you," she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. The officers grew visibly angry. The stern-faced one snarled, "Is that so? Then we'll do this the hard way." They boarded the boat. Before her eyes, they mercilessly tossed Evelyn's personal belongings, a framed photograph, a meaningful necklace she had worn for years, her journal, into the sea. They ransacked the interior, turning everything upside down. Most critically, they deliberately damaged the Pathfinder navigation system mounted on the deck. Evelyn's heart froze. A multi-billion-dollar project, years of dedicated work, was being destroyed before her very eyes. Yet she remained silent. If her identity were revealed prematurely, she wouldn't be able to understand the true depth of this corruption network or the sensitivity of her operation. They handcuffed Evelyn and took her to their own patrol boat. As the Coast Guard vessel headed towards the harbor, their bullying did not cease. Approaching the harbor entrance, one of the officers mercilessly turned the Sea Ghost's rudder and deliberately scraped the sailboat against the shallow rocks at the harbor entrance. With a harsh screech, the Sea Ghost tilted, taking on water, and began to sink. Along with the boat, both Evelyn's personal belongings and the invaluable highly classified Pathfinder test equipment disappeared to the bottom of the Pacific. This was a deliberate act to destroy evidence of their bullying. Upon disembarking at the harbor, Evelyn was handed over to local security officers. The same condescending attitude persisted here. She was especially disparaged and subjected to insults and threats because she was a woman. "You lost your boat, little lady. If you don't do what we say, you won't see the light of day again," they warned her as she was taken to the police station. Despite all these threats, Evelyn showed no emotion on her face. She continued to conceal her true identity, to understand the full extent of this corruption and dismantle it from its roots. Every insult only strengthened her resolve. At the police station, things continued in the same vein. It was clear that the security forces of the harbor area, from the bottom to the top, were involved in this corruption. She was seated at a table to have her statement taken. The officer looked at the civilian ID taken from Evelyn. A mocking smile spread across his face. "Jessica Ryan," he sneered, his voice filling the quiet of the dimly lit room. "Let's see what crimes you've been involved in, huh?" The officer reached for the computer keyboard and began to type Evelyn's civilian ID number into the system. The officer contemptuously examined the ordinary civilian ID in his hand. A mocking smile spread across his face. Jessica Ryan," he sneered, his voice cutting through the silence of the dimly lit police station room. "Let's see what crimes you've been involved in, huh?" He fixed a taunting gaze on Evelyn. The officer reached for the computer keyboard and began to type Evelyn's civilian ID number into the system. At that moment, the other officers in the station chuckled amongst themselves, convinced this ordinary woman was just another pitiful victim caught up in their dirty business. But at that very instant, the computer screen in front of the officer abruptly flashed crimson. A single word, glowing in large, bold letters, blazed across the screen. "Access denied." The officer stared at the screen in bewilderment. Then, assuming a malfunction, he slammed his hand against the monitor. "What's going on here?" he muttered, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation. The computer screen reverted to a standard system error message, automatically generated from the Navy network. But this was no mere glitch. That seemingly ordinary civilian ID number had just matched the real military identity of Commander Admiral Evelyn Hayes, which was registered on the Navy's highest security servers. The moment her ID number was entered into the system, the central computers of naval intelligence had been triggered. This was part of a complex, multi-layered security protocol, years in the making. Whenever the ID number of a top-ranking Navy admiral was unauthorizedly entered into a civilian inquiry system, the network would instantly lock down and issue an emergency alert. And the alarm had already sounded. At Naval headquarters, in a classified security room, red lights began to flash menacingly. On a large screen, the words "Admiral Hayes, Emergency Identity Breach" blared. The Navy's elite Special Operations Unit, the Nightblade team, was instantly activated to rescue the Admiral. Blackhawk helicopters roared to life on the base's tarmac, tearing through the darkness of the night, already on their way to the police station where Evelyn was held. The officers at the police station were still trying to comprehend the "access denied" message on the computer screen. Was it a glitch? A cyber attack? They whispered among themselves, examining the screen in confused astonishment. Just then, they were startled by a deafening roar from outside. The sound grew steadily louder, swelling, shaking the windows of the police station building. In the sky above the station, 3 massive Blackhawk helicopters appeared, their powerful rotors kicking up dust and gravel in the parking lot as they began their descent. The officers rushed to the windows, their mouths agape in utter disbelief. "What in God's name is happening?" they yelled, their voices swallowed by the deafening helicopter noise. At that very moment, the doors of the police station burst open. Elite Naval Special Forces commanders and heavily armed, determined soldiers from the Nightblade team stormed inside. Their faces were etched with a formidable blend of anger and resolve. Evelyn, who had been sitting calmly at the interrogation table, slowly rose to her feet. The tired expression on her face was gone, replaced by the unshakable authority befitting a top-ranking Navy admiral. Her gaze swept over the officers who had just condescended to her. The arrogant officer at the desk, seeing Evelyn stand and witnessing her self-assured gaze, faltered for a moment. His eyes darted to the high-ranking officers pouring through the door, and the mocking sneer on his face slowly froze into numb astonishment. Evelyn took a deep breath, and her voice, now powerful and clear, cut through the commotion in the station. "Good evening. I am Admiral Evelyn Hayes, United States Navy." The officers froze, their eyes widened in disbelief. They couldn't believe that the ordinary woman they had just disparaged as Jessica Ryan was now claiming to be an admiral. Evelyn continued, her voice now even sharper, laced with icy authority. "For the bullying you have inflicted here, for the damage you have caused to highly classified Navy property on my vessel, and for this entire network of corruption, all of you will be held accountable." Color drained from the faces of everyone in the police station. In particular, the members of the small, corrupt ring known for raiding tourist boats under the guise of minor deficiencies, intimidating people for bribes, impounding vessels of those who refused to pay, and even sinking them, were utterly stunned. The Admiral's arrival was not merely a rescue operation, it was the end of a long-standing network of corruption and abuse, the beginning of a sweeping purge. The chilling silence in the police station was pierced only by Admiral Evelyn Hayes's unwavering gaze. The officers who had moments ago looked at her with contempt and called her "little lady" now cowered, their legs trembling. Captain Thomas Vance, the commanding officer of the Naval Special Operations Team leading the operation, and the Nightblade team had completely secured the station. Every officer was forced to surrender their identification and service weapon. Top-level sensors from the Naval Security Command immediately seized every computer in the station, initiating instant replication of all radio logs and electronic data. Amidst this chaos, Evelyn maintained her composure. She was no longer the interrogated, she was the inquisitor. Her eyes scanned every corner of the police station, seeking to understand the full depth of this corrupt network. She looked at the detention cells. There were likely many innocent people unjustly held, just as she had been. This situation was not merely about bribery. It was an organized criminal enterprise. A comprehensive investigation spanning 2 grueling days immediately commenced. Specialized forensic IT experts brought in by Naval Intelligence meticulously examined the police station's computers, confiscated cell phones, and unearthed hidden ledgers. Visual evidence emerged from harbor cameras, unmistakably showing the moment the Coast Guard officers deliberately rammed the Sea Ghost against the shallow rocks at the harbor entrance, causing it to sink. These images clearly depicted the officers intentionally destroying the vessel. Furthermore, the investigation revealed their years-long scheme of raiding tourist boats under the pretext of minor deficiencies, intimidating individuals into paying bribes, impounding vessels of those who refused, and even sinking them. The illicit gains they amassed were funneled through a complex money laundering network extending to high-ranking officials. The investigation uncovered a vast network of corruption, reaching from harbor administration to high-ranking Coast Guard officers and even implicating some local politicians. The officer who had typed Admiral Hayes' civilian ID into the system, along with other key figures in this criminal enterprise, were systematically identified and arrested. Evelyn's decision to conceal her identity that night and to design the system to trigger itself had ensured that this rotten structure would collapse from the bottom up, not just from the top down. This was yet another testament to her ingenious foresight. The Navy awarded Admiral Evelyn Hayes its highest commendations for her courage and strategic brilliance in this incident. The classified Pathfinder system, though damaged, was repaired with the salvaged data and continued its development, now with enhanced security protocols. Evelyn was honored with a special commendation for dismantling a critical corruption network that posed a national security threat. However, for her, this was more than just a story of heroism. It was a turning point that shook her faith in bureaucracy and established institutions. The profound irony of a Navy admiral testing a system vital for her nation's security being subjected to extortion and threats by her own country's security forces resonated deeply within her. Admiral Evelyn Eve Hayes's story swiftly became a legend, echoing through the corridors of the Navy and across all Coast Guard units. Her quiet courage, sharp intellect, and uncompromising stance against corruption inspired a new generation of officers. She was not just an admiral, she was the embodiment of justice, having personally exposed the decay within the system. Thanks to her, the Pathfinder system was now not merely a technological achievement, but also a symbolic pathfinder or trailblazer in the fight against corruption. Evelyn's story became a living testament to how powerful women leaders, through their silent battles beyond appearances, can bring about monumental change. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to discover more stories of strong women and those who pursue justice like Evelyn Hayes. Share your thoughts on the story, how this type of corruption can be prevented, or the moment that touched you the most in the comments. Your support makes the Truth in the Mirror community even bigger.